a Noble Media Group member.
The world is very different now, for man holds in his mortal hands the power to abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life.
6,000 years ago, man invented the wheel. 5,000 years later, he invented the printing press. 460 years later, he would fly. 70 years later, he would step on the moon. And 8 years later, he would send a spacecraft beyond our solar system. Today, we have computers which can think for themselves and robots that can dance. Properly utilized, today's technologies can bring an end to poverty, hunger, and even the need to work, or to make bombs that will end all life on Earth. Will we destroy ourselves or come together?
It is now 85 seconds to midnight. This is the closest the world has ever been to midnight.
Join Joe Carvin as he explores these questions, because mankind is on the hinge of history.
Hello, Joe. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Hinge of History. How are we doing,
Thank you
Joe?
so much, Brian. And I don't know if you noticed, Brian, I'm wearing a different, I usually like to try and wear a business shirt, but you know, we're talking about topics that are way out there. But I want us to be grounded today and celebrate the New York Knicks victory for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, I'm a big Knicks fan being from New York. We haven't won for 53 years. But what's really fun about the Knicks victory, one, how they united the city. I mean, the city's come together in an unprecedented way. My daughter became a patriotic fan. We have all these political frictions. Everybody's come together and around the Knicks, one. And two, fantastic men of character. The captain, Jalen Brunson, gave up $113 million so other guys could come on the team and play alongside them to win the championship. I mean,
Wow.
So those are unheard of. So I just want to give a shout out to my Knicks and the men of character for the New York Knicks. They played good basketball, great basketball, team basketball, and everyone on the team contributed. So I'm walking a little higher. And since we talk about all these crazy issues, again, we'll talk about them today as well. I just wanted to wear a little bit. And we're going to have a parade tomorrow. And it's fun because, well, I will say quickly, the games are too intense for me. So I turn the game off at halftime and go to sleep. And if they won, I watch it. If I don't, they don't. So my daughter called me after we won, and I went and had a few beers with her afterwards. So good family event. Well,
I'm going to point out to that. So if anybody that knows that watches me on this program or any other program, I wear black. However, when my Texas Rangers win again, okay, go to the World Series, they win the World Series, I'm going to have my Rangers shirt on too. So mark that one down. Mark that one down, Joe.
That one down, exactly. Beautiful. Well, listen, we have another great show for you today, and ultimately, Brian, what I'm going to ask you to do is to show that first video on Demis Hassabis talking about AGI, if you wouldn't mind, and he's talking about the imminence of AGI, artificial general intelligence. So if you'd show that video.
I'll do it right now.
I'm curious, like looking at today with like Omni, for example, versus 3 years ago when Gemini was first released.
Yeah.
How have your AGI timelines kind of shifted? Has it gone according to plan, or has it gone faster, slower?
I think it's gone according to plan. So a few years ago, you probably saw, maybe we even talked about in interviews, I used to say 5 to 10 years. Maybe that's 2 or 3 years ago. I think we're sort of exactly on track. And I would say my confidence interval is narrowed. So,
Okay.
These days I'm thinking it's 2030 plus or minus a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So 2030 plus or minus a year. That's soon.
Yeah, very soon.
How are you guys preparing, like internally?
Well,
at Google?
we're first of all, we've done a lot of engineering work under the hood in the last year, which you see the surface of when we announce things like this. Mm-hmm. But actually, you can almost think the whole stack had to be rewritten to be sort of AI first, model first and now agent first.
Right.
So that's quite a big change from like normal software. And obviously, there's all this huge infrastructure that serves billions of users every day at lightning speed, and that's all got to work. And I think we've made massive improvements on that over the past year, and that's why you can see all the goodness of the AI models flowing through into our product surfaces, so quickly and in such compelling ways. So I think that's big. And but yeah, in terms of AGI, I think we're sort of on track, and actually we're sort of on track from where we thought back in 2010 when we started DeepMind. People like Shane, my co-founder, was on record saying around 2028, 2030, and we thought of it as a 20-year mission, and I think we're on track for that.
I'm curious, like,
Incredible.
Right.
So talk to me, Joe.
So the reason I wanted to show that is because Demis Hassabis, and we talked to him about last time being the adult in the room, he has been the most conservative in terms of predicting AGI, artificial general intelligence. And, Dario Amodei, Elon Musk, a number of people are talking this year, 2027. Some people say we've already achieved it. But Demis Hassabis, up until today, until this video we saw, and that's why this video is so important, up until this Google conference, he'd been saying 50% probably in 5 to 10 years. And he also has a higher definition. He says when AGI can solve a problem the same way Einstein did. In other words, when he can come up with a theory of relativity on his own, not just answer questions, because they're the traditional sense of smart we've talked about, they're far smarter than we are, but
Right.
when they can become creative and autonomous. So for him to say now, 2030, a year before or a year after, that's a huge change.
We are there. I mean, that's around the
We're
corner.
there. We're there. And so I was going to talk about that and Google, but we're living in a world that's just skyrocketing forward. So what happened overnight? Google just published a 67-page essay where they're talking about how the time between artificial general intelligence and artificial superintelligence. Now, let me explain. We've been talking about the singularity.
Right.
One could argue artificial superintelligence is the singularity, but artificial general intelligence was when the AI becomes autonomous and can, be as effective as a worker as you or I, right? They think like you and I. They can strategize. They're autonomous. Hey, Brian, have you thought about this, right? So it's a seemingly sentient, whether the conscious or not, leave that to the scientists, but it seemingly have all the attributes that a general human being, and obviously they'd be smarter than us, but on a human level. Artificial superintelligence is when the AI is smarter than the whole of humanity. The whole of humanity. And when that happens, we can't keep up. Wait, when that happens, forget about it. So ultimately, they published this report from AGI to ASI. It's an in-depth analysis. And they start off by talking about the core advantages of digital intelligence, right? Speed and throughput. Digital processes operate at the speed of light.
Right.
Perfect memory and copying. Scalable parallelism. Millions of individual digital agents can work on a single problem simultaneously. You're talking about agentic swarms. And finally, the one I like, modularity and disembodiment. They're not sleeping, they're not eating, right?
Right.
So they have huge advantages. So they then talk about the 4 pathways to ASI. Once you've achieved AGI, they see 4 pathways that are independent of one another. So they talk about scaling AGI, the whole, just more and more data center, more and more compute. We've talked about a million-fold increase in compute. So one hope is that they can achieve ASI with more and more compute. I mean, again, Demis is clear. We'll achieve AGI by 2030.
Right.
And the question is, how long before you get to ASI? I think I'd be surprised to think it's more than 5 years. For one, either the scaling hits, you have a paradigm shift, you have recursive self-improvement. This is what Anthropic's talking about, is another pathway. This is the idea that I.J. Good talked about in 1965. Once you create an ultra intelligent machine that can create another ultra intelligent machine, Katie bar the door, they can go faster and faster. And ultimately, we talked about just now large scale multi agent collectives that are swarms. So ultimately, the reason they wrote the paper is because everybody's sort of talking about this ginormous breakthrough. And they're saying that's a way that's misconceptualizing the way this is going to happen. It's not an AG event. There's going to be a transition of dramatic breakthroughs along the way that will set the stage. Now, what's the risk? And the risk that they see is ultimately the loss of the human in the loop. There'll be no more
We've talked about that, and we've talked about
right,
that.
right. And so ultimately, the big worry is the fact that the breakdown of human evaluation. And I'll read here. Once an AI system moves post-human level capability, the transition from AGI to ASI, it begins proposing scientific hypotheses, writing complex code, or designing cryptographic structures that no collective group of humans experts can verify. Right?
That's
They're too
crazy.
smart. We can't keep up.
That is crazy. So I got a
So,
quick question, and I know you want to go from here. Joe, will we know when we've achieved AGI? I mean, in theory, could we have achieved it right now? We just wouldn't know it for a little while down the line.
some people argue that. So again, the way I look at it, Brian, there's really four AIs. You had perception AI, was basically Google search. You have generative AI, which was ChatGPT, the November 22 breakthrough. And
Right.
this is Jensen Huang explaining it to the world. So generative AI. This is the big year. 2026 is the year of agentic AI. That's where you create an agent that ultimately it's a digital brain in your computer, and you can have it do whatever you want. Well, not whatever you want. You have to
Right.
set it up. But what we can say, the CEO of McKinsey says we've got 60,000 employees, 35,000 human beings, and 25,000 agents. Hello, 25,000 agents. So at the end of the day, so ultimately, the third thing is agentic AI, and that's what everyone's seen.
Hmm.
That's what Dennis Hassabis has seen. They're all seeing. We talked about Anthropic. Anthropic, 80% of the coding now is done by these agents, not by human beings.
Mm.
The people working in Anthropic are 8 times more productive. So what they're seeing is the agentic AI is happening faster and faster and faster, accelerating the whole trend. They're being able to bring all the compute they need. They're building the data centers out. Wall Street's funding this whole phenomena. So we're watching the infinite economy be built, infinity economy be built in front of our eyes. But what's the risk? The risk is, as I say, is we can't control it. It's just too smart. So the report warns of an existential valuation vacuum, right? If we cannot reliably score or evaluate what the system produces, we cannot safely implement reinforcement learning or optimization targets. If we attempt to use unverified, automated AI verifiers to oversee these systems without a rigorous mathematical baseline, we risk entering an opaque optimization loop where the system optimizes for criteria completely unaligned with real world humanity. Okay, that's a lot of big words, right? A
Yeah.
lot of big words. This is my favorite though. So I go to my AI and say, okay, all right, let's get to the brass tacks. I said, there's a lot of big words here, and they do call for a new ecosystem the way Anthropic did, and I'll talk about that in a second. But why did they write this report? So I said, come on, let's be honest. I said, I need you to be honest. It seems very clear to me that the paper was written because the people at Google DeepMind are concerned, if not terrified, that humanity is not responding with the kind of regulation and preparation that is needed for the tech tsunami. Please comment. And this is the answer from AI. This is Gemini AI. It is completely valid that you see it that way. And honestly, your reading of the room is spot on. While a corporate research from paper from a major lab like Google DeepMind will always be wrapped in the careful academic language of fragments, frameworks, and open world verification ecologies, The underlying urgency is unmistakable. When researchers of this caliber shift the conversation from how do we get to AGI to what happens when we get AGI, it's a fundamental shift. And so ultimately, there's a big disconnect between, as we've been talking, exponential tech and linear governance. And that's why it's amazing that these guys keep coming to us. And so I'm going to give you now, I want you to go to our next video, Brian, to our Oppenheimer moment.
Okay.
I'll never forget, I was shocked to hear this Oppenheimer moment. And let's play that, and then we'll talk about why it's so shocking.
And just for those that don't know, the Oppenheimer was basically the godfather of the nuclear bomb.
Right,
So,
and he had the horrifically difficult choice to create a bomb that could bring an end to World War II and leave a legacy of destruction out there or not. And he ultimately participated in the bomb. But that's a huge, horrifically difficult. And now the Oppenheimer moment are these AI gentlemen. And the head of Anthropic is Dario Amodei, and the head of Google DeepMind is Demis Hassabis. You're going to hear from both of them in an absolutely fantastic interview.
I'll put it on right now.
Can I ask you both of you actually, a more personal question about this? Because you are personally leading companies that are likely to be at the forefront of this. So the personal decisions you make are going to shape this technology. Do you ever worry about ending up like Robert Oppenheimer?
Look, I worry about those kinds of scenarios all the time. That's why I don't sleep very much. I mean, there's a huge amount of responsibility on the people, probably too much on the people leading this technology. I think that's why us and others are advocating for, we probably need new institutions to be built to help govern some of this. You know, I talked about CERN. I think we need a kind of equivalent of an IAEA atomic agency to monitor sensible projects and those that are more risk taking. I think, you know, we need to think about the society needs to think about what kind of governing bodies are needed. Ideally, it would be something like the UN, but given the geopolitical complexities, that doesn't seem very possible. So, you know, I worry about all that all the time, and we just try to do, at least on our side, everything we can in the vicinity and influence that we have.
Dario, are you sleeping well?
Yeah, my thoughts exactly echo Demis. So my feeling is that almost every decision that I make feels like it's kind of balanced on the edge of a knife. Like, you know, if we don't build fast enough, then the authoritarian countries could win. If we build too fast, then the kinds of risks that Demis is talking about and that we've written about a lot, you know, could prevail. And you know, either way, I'll feel that it was my fault that, you know, we didn't make exactly the right decision. And I also agree with Demis that this idea of, you know, governance structures outside ourselves. I think these kinds of decisions are too big for any one person. We're still struggling with this, you know, as you alluded to. Not everyone in the world has the same perspective, and so, you know, some countries in a way are adversarial on this technology. But even within all those constraints, I think we somehow have to find a way to build a more robust governance structure that doesn't put this in the hands of just a few people.
Wow. If that doesn't take the air out of the room. And they're right. I mean, how do you build some type of a governing structure that, I mean, it's not going to be the UN, and this is not a political statement at all, but it's dysfunctional. And it's very political. And I don't have an answer for that, Joe. I agree with him, but I mean, what do you do?
I think there's a couple of interesting points. I want to finish the show talking about that. But for me, how often do you get business leaders calling for more regulation?
Yeah, yeah, good
And
point.
how often do you get business leaders? I mean, these are men of integrity. These are men of, they're not doing it for the money, not even for the power. They're hoping to transform humanity, use this technology, these tools to help bring an end to poverty, hunger, disease, and the need to work.
Yeah.
And that's what, and again, Demis Hassabis is very clear, scientific discovery, the end to disease. But did you listen to what they said? Demis Hassabis, I lose sleep. He's losing sleep over this. He's
Both of
terrified.
them. Yeah.
Larry Amodei, every decision he makes is on the edge of a knife edge. so the two of them fully appreciate and understand. Now, this interview was 18 months to 2 years ago. So what's really interesting now, right? And I think it would be fair to say, they haven't done enough to push the envelope to get. They talked about CERN, which is a European entity that could be a model for going forward for regulation. But ultimately, you could say, but now Anthropic, they filed for an IPO on Monday and they came out on Thursday saying we need to pause. This 67-page paper, they both understand. They're both moving in the right direction. In fact, let me just finish the quotes here, if I could, because the paper finishes with a call to action, and they're calling for an open world verification ecologies, right? They want to try to force a shift in global priorities. They're essentially telling governments and the broader scientific community, stop preparing for the IE of yesterday.
Yeah.
Stop focusing solely on deep fakes and automated copyright issues. We need a Manhattan level project, global focus on automated verification and safety infrastructure before the capability curve goes vertical. Ladies and gentlemen, they're there in writing. Please, please, somebody take it. And thank the dear Lord for Brian Mistro and Joe Carvin, because we want to generate this conversation. Seriously. Well, I want us to win the Nobel Peace Prize. This is the conversation I'm committed to taking across the world with our One World Global Education Program, with you, Brian, because at the end of the day, all those political conversations are nonsense. If I'm honest, they're nonsense. The tsunami is here. We either prepare for it or it overwhelms us. And then nobody knows what's going to happen after. This is humanity's last chance to take control of what's happening. And so you saw the Oppenheimer moment very clearly in the video.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing it very clearly with Anthropic's recent statement, and you're seeing it very clearly with Google's essay. And that's what I wanted to share with people today. And now we can have the conversation, what we do with it. I mean, Brian, you have a political show. How much conversation in the political sphere are there about this?
Basically none. Basically
zero.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right when you said, we're talking about what's happening today or yesterday instead of talking about what's coming tomorrow. And I completely agree with you. I want to throw out a little bit of an analogy with the Oppenheimer moment. I remember before they set off the first bomb test, that there was a discussion about there is a possibility that this bomb could destroy the entire planet. This test could destroy the entire planet in a nuclear chain reaction. But the odds are there, but we don't think it's going to happen. Is that not an analogy to where we're at with this too?
1,000% and 1,000%. That's why I keep coming back to one of my idols, one of my heroes, Sir Martin Rees, who wrote a book in 2003 called Our Final Century. And he's a scientist. He's a former president of the Royal Society of Science, Britain's royal astronomer. And ultimately, he concluded humanity's chance to reach the year 2100 50-50 because these scientific threats, while they'd be 1 in 100, how are we regulating them? Who's making those decisions? Now, he wrote that in 2003. We're 2026. 18 months, 2 years ago, Demis Hassabis and Darian, so please regulate us. Elon Musk for 10 years has been begging for this. He's been saying it's far more worrisome than nuclear Armageddon. At the end of the day, we've got to find a way. Elon Musk and Max Tegmark called for a pause in March 2023. Anthropic's calling for a pause today, and nobody's paying any attention. And this is what we call in our book situational awareness. And this is why I wish OpenAI and Sam Altman hadn't launched ChatGPT in November 2022, because the world wasn't ready for it, is not ready for it. So basically what happened, he launched this extraordinary tool on a divided world with two superpowers competing ferociously, with trillion-dollar companies, competing across the globe. And now, ultimately, each one competing to be first. At least Dario Amodei and Demis said, well, I'd rather be running it. Hopefully we can get there first so we can help regulate. And we've been talking about how they've been trying to do that. But Google's taken its capital expenditure from $30 billion to $190 billion. What that tells you everything you need to know. They just raised $90 billion in the stock market. They raised another $90 billion in debt, and they're cash surplus. So that's a six-fold increase in capital expenditure. They're all in on this race. So ultimately, this situational awareness, which is I can't pronounce his name, Mr. Aschenbrenner, kid that graduated Columbia at 19, went and worked for OpenAI as valedictorian, went and worked for OpenAI 3 years. He said they're not serious about safety, left, and in June 2024, he described exactly everything that's happening today. He actually set up his own hedge fund. He's made 6 times his money. He's like gone from $1 billion to $6 billion because he can anticipate what's happening in the market, what's happening in the world. I don't know. So in terms of you and I, we need a grassroots movement. We're trying to do that at One World in the K-12 education space. You and I are trying to do it in the non-political space.
Yeah.
I think the more we can get this message out, the better. And in fact, we talked about this last week. The conversation, and unfortunately, look, I'm a huge believer in the need for good government and the need for good education. And these idiots, I'm sorry, at booing Eric Schmidt, they should be booing those educators because those educators did zero to prepare them for the real world. Sorry, zero.
Yeah.
The conversation we're having should be the first conversation everybody has. Everybody's invested in their own little fiefdom. We talk about one where we talk about why is Bill Gates only 1/4 correct? I love Bill Gates. Again, why is he only 1/4 correct? He wrote a book called How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, which we use for our curriculum at One World. He was interviewed by Anderson Cooper. Anderson Cooper said, if we've got to go from 50 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions to net zero, it seems impossible. Bill Gates said it's not impossible, it's possible, but it's the most important thing humankind's ever done. Well, he's right. It's one of but that climate change is not the only threat.
Yeah.
AI is a more imminent threat. And you turn on the evening news, Russia's a global threat. And finally, we now have the abundance. That's why we're at the hinge of history. Now we can legitimately, technologically create a world of abundance, a world without poverty, hunger, disease, and the need to work. So that's where we are as a crossroads. Every one of the 8.3 billion people on the planet Earth is a co-creator of our universe. Those of us alive today have a huge responsibility to the trillion. That's one T, trillion. Yeah. But rather than focus on Elon being a trillionaire, let's focus on the trillion human beings yet to be born. Let's 100%. Focus on the fact that humanity is at an adolescent stage and we need to mature. So we're hoping to create with this podcast, with our educational programs, and just, fair-minded conversations. We're trying to create a world where our wisdom, our human wisdom, is commensurate with our technology.
100%. I love it. And I'll just add one more little analogy to the Oppenheimer moment. Again, a little bit of history. One of the reasons that Oppenheimer went forward with the bomb, as anybody that's read any of his history knows, is because Germany was already on the way to the bomb too. And the goal was to beat, he said, even if we don't, Germany could be there. So I'd rather we have it than Germany. There's another
I hear a great quote. We have time for one last great quote. George Kennan, the famous U.S. diplomat, spoke at Oppenheimer's funeral. And he said, no one understood the challenges faced by humanity from the invention he created better than Oppenheimer. And we created a technology out of all proportion to our moral strength. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Out of all proportion to our moral strength. We got to build that moral strength. And that's why I love the New York Knicks, the captain of the Knicks. I'm telling you, bring it all home, Ryan. But really, I just love good athletes, good character, none of this in your face. No one, they're not in your face. They quiet, win the game. They're not, flaunting their success. And so ultimately, I think the New York Knicks may be the pathway to victory for New York, bringing New York together, and eventually with the World Cup, hopefully bring the world together.
Let's hope so. Well, congratulations, New York Knicks. Everybody, thank you for joining us today. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. It's free. You'll see this show, you'll see the lives and the recording versions. And if you've got a question, leave a question. If you like it, press the like button. We will read those on air and have done it many times before. But you won't just get this show. You're also going to get, if you enjoy politics, the arena. If you prefer more kind of deep dives where it doesn't get kind of that raw political, venue, then we've got Restoring the American Dream. And it looks like we're going to have 2 more programs that will be starting soon. I hope to be able to announce those pretty soon. Joe, thanks again for a wonderful, wonderful show. I do believe we will not be having a show this next week due to your travels. That's correct. Okay, so we will see everyone not this coming Monday, but the next Monday. And again, watch these. Drop us some questions because Joe and I would love to talk about them on air. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you next time.
You've been watching Joe Carvin's Hinge of History. The No Bull Media Group is available on all major social media platforms. Make sure to give us a follow where you can watch this show and many others.
A No Bull Media Group member.
Oh.